Okay, good morning. Thank you all for attending today. We are very excited to have the first information day for what we're calling the Small Call Innovation Pilot. Okay, just so that you know, we will be recording this session so that you can then come back, link to it, and follow through on some of the issues that you might have missed or you might have need some additional help on, and other people will be able to access that. Today for the meeting, you're going to have three hosts, and we'll just introduce them. So my name is Gareth McNaughton, Director for Innovation and Strategic Alliances. We also have Taylor Sawyer and Antonio. I'll hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. This is Taylor Sawyer. I work on the innovation team with Gareth as an entrepreneurial innovation officer, and I'm very happy to welcome you today.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this info session and your interest in your goals. I'm Antonio Mellado, part of the innovation team. We'll be introducing the financial sustainability mechanism and the financial sustainability of the KIC. Thank you.
Great. So as we go through the slides, we are sure you're going to have questions. We have a question and answer session at the end. So it's fine if you want to put your questions into the Q&A box and we'll be going through them, okay? So it would be great if we could try and get through the presentation and keep those questions to the end, and we'll be giving about half an hour to that. Okay, so with that, let's get on with the topic. Okay, next slide. So today we're going to review 7 main topics. First thing is the call overview. Who can apply? What are the timelines? And so you can plan your time accordingly and realize whether this call is for you or not. Excuse me. Secondly, we look at the call scope. In other words, what type of projects, what type of challenge areas, what are we wanting to fund? Again, you can compare and see if this is for you or not. And then we'll move on to some key points, which is the money, okay? The budget, how you can contribute to the activity, how we should work with end clients in this, because we want to give you the money to work with end clients, and how that can be arranged. So that's going to be key. Then we'll look at the actual process, and it's a very simple process called the rewards platform. We'll introduce it, show you the screenshots, show you how you can complete that, and hopefully set your mind at rest that this isn't a heavy, burdensome EU program. Then we'll look at the evaluation for those who will be awarded, so that you could understand how to write, how to target, and how to be able to win this money. And then awarded projects, if you were successfully chosen, then basically the documents you'd have to do, the timelines you've got to do it, what it means to you to make sure that that can work. And then we do the Q&A. So that's how we're going to look at video. Okay. So with that, we'll go to the next slide, and I'll hand over to Taylor.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Gareth, and welcome everyone. So I will just give some basics about this call before we get into a bit more of the detailed content for today. So first of all, the focus of this call, as Gareth mentioned, this is a new call. This is our first call of the year. We're very excited to be launching it. And the focus of this call is to find solutions and products and services from startups and SMEs that are able to support and give value to key providers within the urban mobility ecosystem. Okay, so the solutions, services, and products that we're looking for should be relevant to stakeholders such as city authorities, passenger transport operators, energy companies, police, security services. So it is a wide range of different stakeholders, but all within that urban mobility ecosystem is where we're looking for the solutions to target. And the types of things that can be submitted to this call are specifically one of 2 different types of product solution service. Okay, so we're looking for startups and SMEs that have something that is for an existing client, but it's a new product, a new service, a new solution that they are looking to offer to that existing client. Or we are also looking for a product or a solution or service that a startup or SME already has, but they're looking to significantly improve it in a way that it would be suitable to expand into a new sector or a new geographic area. Okay, so these are the different types of products services and solutions that we're looking to see submitted to this call. Now, very important, who can apply? So we are looking for SMEs, and we use the official EU kind of definition of SME, and we've also added a couple of additional criteria. Okay, so make sure if you're looking to apply that you fit into this category. So startups and SMEs should not be older than 10 years. Okay, so if you're looking to apply, your startup or SME should have been founded in the last 10 years. It also should be registered in an EU member state or a third country associated to Horizon Europe, including the UK and Switzerland. Okay, so it needs to be legally registered within this geographic area in order to be eligible to submit an application. We're also looking for startups and SMEs that have at least 3 full-time employees. So just in terms of maturity and size, we are looking for startups and SMEs that already have at least a core team, okay? And then lastly, we are looking for applicants that have some existing track record and success, already developing products, working with innovation, and having some sales. So we are looking for entities that have this kind of track record. And finally, we just want to note that we are open to new entities. You don't need to have already been engaged with us in the past. We're also open to entities that have worked with us previously, but we do want to note that if you have already received funding from us for a product and you're looking at this call, make sure that what you submit to this call is something new, okay? So we cannot fund the same product twice. So people who have worked with us before, you're very welcome, but make sure that you're submitting something new to this call. And what are the key dates? So the call launched last week, and you can see here we are on the 31st of January having our information day. And this is just to give you an idea of the process for this call. So like usual, this call will be open for 2 months, which means that it will be closing on the 25th of March. And then during the month of April, we have an an evaluations process. That's a 2-phase process that I will describe later in a bit more detail. And then the projects that we select through this call, we are expecting them to start in May. Okay, so it's quite a quick process. If you're used to our usual innovation call, this is a different timeline. So we're looking for projects that would be ready to start probably in May, and then would be working during the rest of the months of the year. And I'll get into a bit more of that later, but just to give you an idea of the timeline for those that are applying the evaluations process, etc. And with that, oh, one more. Okay. So the call budget, you may be interested to know how many startups and SMEs we're looking to fund. So this call, we are looking for 10 startups and SMEs. And the budget that you can request from us is a maximum of 59,500 euros per project, okay? And we are also looking for, as usual, a co-funding rate. So in your application, we're looking for a 30% minimum co-funding rate. So your overall project budget that you propose could be more than this 59,000, but that's the max that we from EIT Urban Mobility can fund for each of these 10 startups and SMEs that we're looking to fund. Okay, so we'll go a little bit more into the call budget overviews later in terms of what you can submit, but this is the basics. So with that, I will hand it back to Gareth to discuss a bit more the topics and the scope of this call.
Hello. Now, I've put on a headset. I think some people had some issues hearing me. Is this clear? Fabulous.
Yeah,
okay.
That's better.
Okay, so call scope. So we'll go to the next slide. Just so you know, we work with challenge areas inside EIT Urban Mobility, and we have 3 that we've identified that we're going to work with. So we'll go through them now. And the first one is about sustainable city logistics. So the gig economy has changed how everybody relates to shopping, delivery, and with COVID, what we've seen is the massive expansion and take up of these services. So it's all about transportation of goods, parcel delivery materials to domestic, and it can also include reverse and commercial waste disposal. So we have a system in Europe where the take back policy from the gig economy means you can order a t-shirt in 4 sizes, get it delivered to your home in 24 hours, take the one you want, and then send back 3 t-shirts at no cost. but there actually is a cost. The cost to Europe is about 7 billion a year in take back from e-commerce. So we're very interested in looking at these topical issues. So we want to see cooperation between lots of partners, looking at new business models, brokerage systems, etc. So we would consider a wide variety of topics in this area. So you could look at new vehicles, you could look at procurement and purchasing models. You could look at consolidation hubs and how we share services between different logistics providers in perhaps historic postcodes or cities that are difficult to access or have high pollution. You could look at hub services, spoke and hub, and how you actually arrange that and get the rights to do that. You could look at production models that could be closer to the market, or software solutions for optimizing freight. Also loading, unloading, docking, charging. Lots of the fact is we have some of the e-commerce that we have in some countries, especially in risk. They're about 95% of the vehicles used are combustion engines, while in the rest of Europe, we tend to have a higher rate of electric use in bicycle. So these are the type of things we're happy to consider, okay? You might come up with something completely new, please, no problem. Submit and we're happy to chat. Next slide. Okay, so future mobility. Future mobility for us is more about the digital aspect, and it's about new disruptive services and technologies, and we're looking at improving reliability, regularity, accessibility, and security of mass transit and mobility solutions. So you could be working on artificial intelligence or blockchain. You could look at 5G technologies. You could look at the swap over between the 5G technologies as you move between the city, Internet of Things. We also talk sometimes about the physical internet and how we take some of the elements from the internet and put it into physical infrastructure. Big data analysis. Mobility as a service would also come in here, okay? Shared mobility services, micro-mobility, autonomous driving, and what we call currently CCAM, so it's the collaborative connected autonomous mobility, etc. And within CCAM, urban air mobility is also included. Just importantly for us, CCAM, it doesn't matter whether it's in the water, in the air, or on land. It's the same technologies, LiDAR, 5G, anti-collision algorithms, etc. It's the same stuff. So this is all digital, okay? The next slide. This one is about new models and partnerships on energy. You all are aware of the current energy crisis we have in Europe and the climate crisis. There has been a huge emphasis on us dealing with the fact that 24% of greenhouse gas emissions come from transport. Specifically within cities, we're seeing a huge drive for ultra low emission zones to deal with our pollution and our health. So we want to look at charging infrastructure, rapid rollout, low energy consumption models, solutions to manage assets, looking at other versions of zero emission vehicles. So this could be varies on looking at synthetic, or it could be a hydrogen vehicle, or it could be a hybridization of those vehicles. But we're also looking at charging models and financing. So we have a big issue with finance as people move between countries and getting the best prices for their charging. And so in this, we could also consider fintech as one of our challenges. We're also looking at options for accelerating charging and refueling, and ways that we could work together on energy. So batteries, for example, might also be an element in redesign of batteries, reuse of batteries, second life, etc. Okay, that's the three big topics that we'll be considering for this call as eligible. Okay, next slide. Key points for applications. So you need to remember that this is a single bid. You will bid for this money, but you have to have certain things. And one of those things is, as Taylor highlighted, you either need a new client outside your normal geographic area, so a new client that wants to test your services, or you have an existing client who wants a different or better product from you. Now, obviously, we're not going to have them as part of the project. in your mind, they have to be there. And we have to see evidence that you have an end client who will work with you and is committed to implementing your technology, new or improved, during the duration of the project. So we need a very firm letter of support and commitment from those clients with an explanation of their needs, why they think that they can work with you and what they would hope to see by the end. And this has to be uploaded. If you do not provide an end client support, it is an incomplete application. Okay, next slide. Now, we said, I'm not as excited as I should be for you, so I'm going to be excited now. This is something new we're doing. We are the first of all the EITs to use a new tool that was at our disposal, which is the lump sum. Okay, so basically, you're not going to have that heavy hand of EU projects. You're not going to have 4 consortium members. You're not going to have lots of crazy reporting on you. It's literally, there's a big reference of trust here. Okay, so in advance, to be eligible, we need to know that you've got cost categories that we can agree on, and we'll show you an example later, and that your costs will be eligible. Okay, so we'll go a little bit later of the type of things we can bill. We want you to identify the budgets assigned to each tasks and the expected end dates, so you give us sufficient confidence that we can give this money to you and you'll operate according to the model. And importantly, it must be in line with the normal practices of your business. So if you have a travel policy, which you've already defined for your business, and we can document it and see it, and as long as it's there, that's great for us. We don't have to check that, okay? It has to be reasonable and not excessive. So for example, if you wanted to fly business class or travel on business, we would not say that's excessive, okay? But we give you this information in advance. And importantly, all of the expenditure has to be necessary and in line with the activities proposed, okay? So these are some of the top levels that are really quite simple compared to the heavy duty stuff the EU asks. So let's look at the next slide and we'll explain a little bit more. Okay, so our application is really simple. So you'll see the overall project budget. You put in how much you would like to request from us and what your funding for the 30% is going to be. Now you have to put in that manually. Okay, so then you're going to see on the other side the budget breakdown. Really simple. So your personnel costs, you know, if your salary costs are already defined, if you have an evidence base of similar projects, you can have an estimate of how much that's going to be. If you required subcontracting to do some of a technical element or to buy an equipment, you know, that could be there. Sorry, not equipment, activities, events, etc. Then there's travel and subsistence. So say that you are an SME from France and you're going to implement a new solution in Romania. Of course, you'd have to go and visit the client. That's eligible. Equipment, to be able to ensure that that technology is rolled out, you might find that your client needs some new equipment or needs perhaps additional digital cameras to do the checking of cars and loading and unloading of trucks in a logistic application, and that their cameras don't fit. So you buy some new digital cameras, you have them installed. Other goods and works, 4,500, you know, this could be manpower, etc. If you have to have an engineer come in, go up a lamppost and install the cameras, okay? And indirect costs, they're defined and calculated. Normally, we'll explain a little bit more of how indirect costs are done, but we need to get your calculation made, and that outline is the basis of trust. So based on this, and given the fact that you have a history of operating, it's a lump sum, okay? So if we approve, it's a lump sum, okay? And this changes dramatically from the other ways that SMEs had difficulties working with EU programs. So we think this will be an important first step. And this is why, as a pilot this year, we're going to make sure it works, it's implemented, you're supported, so that this can turn into a normal type of activity. Being the first EIT who's used this model, there's a lot of people who will be watching us from legal and finance. So we really want to make this work for all of us so our life's easier. and have a successful year. Okay, next slide. I'll hand over to Antonio. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Let's start introducing the financial sustainability model of the EIT Urban Mobility. So us as a knowledge innovation community, we receive funds from the EIT that are used as a cascade funding mechanism to fund activities. Those activities produce an income that it could be a product service solution or an improvement of an existing product service solution. And at the end of the implementation, what is expecting is to reach the market. At that point, we will sign a commercial agreement between the EIT Urban Mobility and the innovator, by which we will talk later about the mechanisms that are available, but any income received from those as a result of these agreements will be reinvested in launching future calls for proposals. Next slide, please. So the mechanisms that are available for this call for proposal are mainly two. So revenue share or fee per transaction or equity. Equity is the only option available for invested companies, so companies, the startups that are part of our portfolio, and that will be your preferred option. For the rest of the applicants that are totally new to the EIT Urban Mobility, they still can express their interest on being invested by the EIT. There is a specific section in the application form, and we will organize a webinar later on during the implementation to provide information about our impact venture programs. So the rest might be that we have innovators that have already a commercial agreement in place with us, and the basics of the new innovation implemented through this program is already linked to a commercial agreement. So in those cases, we will review the existing agreement and sign an amendment to the principle. So the revenue share, it's basically a percentage over sales that will be shared with the EIT Urban Mobility for a period of up to 5 years, with a maximum value contribution from our commercial partner of the 100% of the funding received. So that means that a cap will be introduced at any given time during the duration of the contract. If we reach the funding value, the contract will be automatically terminated. So in cases where the influx of revenue can be measured in units, fee per transaction could apply. So for example of that is a charge station, an electric charge station. So each commercial charge will generate a flat fee for the EIT of, for example, €5. It's an example. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so from this year, we have a dedicated team supporting our commercial partners in the go-to-market phase. And I will take the opportunity to introduce these services. There is also a specific section in the application form where you can show your interest. And as with the equity, we will organize a separate meeting to go through all the details of this service. So in general terms, which companies could benefit from these services are companies that have already a product service solution launch, selling already, seeking first clients for a new product or further traction in the market. We work mainly on B2G, business to government, business to business, and B2B2C, business to business to customer. How we can contribute? So we can provide like mentoring services, product market validation of the new innovation, improvement of the sales strategies. We will contribute to the sales pipeline. And obviously, the final objective of this service is to find new clients and new markets for you. Thank you, Taylor. I think you're next, right?
Yes, thank you very much, Antonio. So I will move us on to talk a little bit about the application process, and then the evaluation phases. I just want to introduce the tool that we are using for the applications. So we are using a system called the awards platform. This is what the main page looks like. If you already have an account, then you are familiar. You can go ahead and log in. If you have not used this before, then of course you need to register. So you can see here in the center of the screen, it's a very simple registration just to access the platform, name, email, password. Okay, and then you are in. So once you register, you'll get an email and you need to confirm your email. And then you can log in. And what you will see is a very simple page like this. And all you need to do is simply click Start Application. That is the purple button that you see there. And it will take you to a page like this, where you first need to select a couple of things. So under chapter, there will be a couple of options. You just need to select EIT Urban Mobility Innovation. And then under category, there should just be one category open currently, as we just have this one call open for innovation at the moment. That is the SME small call innovation pilot. And then once you select that, you just need to write an application name. This can be the name of your company, the name of your solution, whatever you want to write here is completely fine. You check the box for the privacy policy, and then these tabs that are at the top of the screen will become active so that you can start filling in your application. Okay, so these are the sections that you will see. Administration is, of course, a series of questions that are not evaluated. It's just information about who is the contact person, how do we get in touch with you, some questions about your company, the size of your company, where is the company registered, these kinds of things. Okay, so it's just information that we need to collect from all applicants in order for your application to be evaluated. And then it's the next sections that are the very important ones that you need to fill in content, because those are the things that get evaluated. So the first section is the strategic fit. And this is where we basically check to make sure that the product, solution, or service that you're submitting to this call really aligns with the scope of the call. So that would be the challenge areas that Gareth described earlier, and you need to let us know if it's a new product or service for an existing client, or if it's something that you're improving for a new sector or a new area. So these kinds of things, this is a fairly short section. Once you get into the excellence, impact, and implementation, you will see basically this type of screen. So these are the questions that you'll find. I just created these screenshots of the application yesterday. So you can see that there's a text box, and then on the right, there's the description of what we are asking you to write in that text box. And also there is a word limit. So you can see here that we're not asking for huge, long answers, okay? So you should be concise, and you should make sure that you, of course, answer all of the things that we are asking, but you need to be concise, okay? So this is the excellence tab, the impact, the implementation, different questions, but will appear the same. And then once you've submitted your application and the call closes on the 25th of March, then it comes back to us and we begin our evaluation process. So there's a two-phase evaluation process. And if you want to read more about the details, it is, of course, in the call manual that's online on our website on pages 14 to 17. So I won't go into huge detail, but it's just to give you an idea of what would happen once your application is submitted and we begin the evaluation process. So we have evaluators who will read the proposals that are submitted. All of the eligible proposals will be scored. And as I mentioned earlier, it's the strategic fit, the excellence, the impact, the implementation that have scoring criteria associated with the questions. And those are listed in the call text. And the evaluation criteria is, of course, linked to the questions that we are asking you. So then what happens is that the top 15 highest scoring applications are invited to move on to the second phase of the evaluation. So everyone who, every submission that is evaluated, you will receive an email saying if you have been selected to move on to this panel hearing phase, and we will give you some instructions and, of course, tell you the date and things like that. But those are online, and basically it's a short 5-minute presentation from the applicants and then some time for Q&A. And then we have another set of criteria that we use to evaluate those top 15 so that we can then focus in on the top 10 scoring applications, which are the ones that we will select to fund in this call. So that is what you can expect from the evaluation process. Now, I also want to give an overview of what happens with the awarded projects. This, of course, we will give in much more detail to the projects that are in the end awarded, but just to give you a heads up so that you know kind of the timeline and what we would expect if you are selected for funding through this call. As I mentioned earlier, the timeline is that the project should start in May. And you can apply for a maximum of an 8-month project. So imagining you're looking to do an 8-month project, that would go until the end of the year. Projects would need to be finished by the end of the year for this call. And essentially in May, we would have some basic administrative tasks that we would need to complete. And that would involve moving over the project that you've submitted onto our online project management tool that we use, Plaza. And then we have a sub-grant agreement, of course, for the funded projects. And then we have a pre-financing mechanism. So the startups and SMEs that are going to be funded would receive some of the funding at the beginning of the project. And then comes the actual project itself, which is the time when the funded projects get to work, they develop their product solution service, and they work with their end client to do live demonstrations. And during those months, we also have an obligation to do some monitoring of our projects. So that's why you can see on this timeline going through the center, June, July, August, September, etc. It says check-in. Okay, so we will be there throughout the process just to keep an eye on things, to give advice, to give support, to make sure that things are going smoothly through this project phase where you're working on the product solution, service development, and the live demonstration. And then I want to just depart from the timeline for a moment to highlight what we mean by a live demonstration. Okay, so this really looks different for every startup or SME based on what is your solution, because it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be a combination of those things. It could be for various, the type of end client that you're going to work with could have different needs, different timelines, different people involved, etc. So we know this, and based on what is going to suit you, you need to think of, okay, we want to do multiple short demos, or it's essential to do an ongoing 3-week demo. We don't have set criteria on this. You have to demo the solution with the end client, but the way that you do that is up to you and the end client to design and demo in a way that is sensible to make sure that you can see how the product solution service works, and so that the end client can also see how it works. So that's just to let you know what we're thinking in terms of the demonstration. And then finally, at the very end of projects, we have some reporting that we have to do. And this involves 3 deliverables for this call. And then we are able to give the final payment to the startups and SMEs that are funded. So these 3 deliverables, I will hand it over to Gareth just to give a basic overview. We have 1 slide per deliverable. It's just to give you a heads up so that you know, if you're looking to apply to this call, what you are getting into, and that everything is simple and clear right from the start. So Gareth, I'll send it back to you.
Fabulous.
Here we have these 3 deliverables, what to expect, and this is the first one.
Okay, so as you know, the big projects that the EU normally funds are massive, they're document heavy, there's loads of partners, just aligning with your partners is a mess. This small grant is a lump sum to 1 individual company, okay? So we've made the whole process simpler, but we're also aiming to make what you have to do in the paperwork simpler too. So the first thing you're going to have to do is you'll have to come to, as Antonia highlighted, a commercial agreement with the organization. So we have an initial section in the application where you'll highlight what you think you're interested in and what you could do. And that's just to help us ensure that you understand that this is real, okay? But then we'll have some discussions early September with our financial people, your financial people, look at the success of the project, how it's going, explaining a little bit what's best for you, what's best for us, and that's an online meeting. And then there'll be follow-ups during October, and that may well be discussing with some of our additional supports organizations, or maybe making introductions to other key partners in our network. And then once we agree on that, there'll be an electronic signing of that commercial agreement, financial sustainability, and that would happen by the 17th of November, importantly. We're not seeking to shake you down for cash. I know we'll have some specific discussions on this. It's a contribution to the ongoing funding of other projects for other companies. Okay, so it's not profit extraction in that, but we will become independent of the EU in about 12 years' time. So we'll be able to fund others. Okay, so it's important that that FSM is about this perpetual innovation fund that other SMEs can benefit from. Okay, next, and after the commercial agreement, is your final performance. This is basically, what did you do? How did it go? Did you do it according to your timeline? What changed? How did you manage to deal with those challenges? And importantly, it should comply with, sorry to say, EU branding guidelines and then EIT, certain colors and templates, which we'll give you. It's just basically, what did you do? How did it work? How did you deal with the challenges? And recap on that. Okay, simple enough. Then there's the reporting on the KPI. So that's basically saying we delivered a product. We actually tested it. And this is the results, okay? And to be able to prove that you had an impact and our investment in you and our partnership with you actually led to something, you should be able to show that someone has bought from you 10K of service. Now, this is completely different. Some people have an app and people buy it and it costs 2.5 euro. So it can either be a cumulative or it can be specifically one client that buys a service for you. But you have to be able to show that someone has bought from you before the end of December. And it can be the acceptance of an invoice by the buyer or paid invoices. Importantly, a part of it could be paid in this year and maybe part of it next year if you've got an ongoing service, and we can work the way around to help you understand that. But we've reduced it to 3, okay? So the commercial agreement, the final report, and the KPI evidence, which is really simple. It's a 1-page template, and then you attach the evidence that someone has ordered and bought from you, okay? Next slide, okay? So there's also an opportunity to become a member. Okay, so we have one of the biggest networks of people working in mobility and urban mobility and logistics across Europe. We have funding in each year that we have about 50-60 million that we give out. And this is also an opportunity for you to become part of that. So we have large car companies, we have large logistics companies, we have manufacturers, and we have a huge number of cities, about 79. They're always looking for solutions. So what we would do as part of this process, you would be required to join the organization with a reduced fee of 2,500. So you can look at that, make sure you understand that. But we also support with matchmaking. We introduce you to other partners that are in your area or could complement you, partners that you could work with in other countries. So we will support you in matchmaking and development. And also we'll allow you access to what's called the Smart City Expo. It's every year in November. Currently, we're the co-sponsors with the Fira de Barcelona, and we're having an increasingly large event called Tomorrow Mobility that's an integral part of that. And we have booths and stands and sessions, etc. We would hope to be able to work with you on that. And then there's also opportunities to consider not our money, but other people's money. And we have a program called Action Impact. So if you have an early stage issue or you have a hardcore technology issue that needs more money than we could give you, is not as close to market, we can put you together with some people and bid for that. And we do offer support to help people identify the resources that they need. Okay, so that's a little bit of how that works. Okay, so there is a requirement to be a member. That's just the way it's going to be, but very much a reduced cost. So with that, Taylor, I think you're going to field the calls and the questions that came in.
Yes, so we already have several questions, which is great. So we can get started with our Q&A segment. Feel free to continue asking questions. There was one I already answered. So someone asked about the recording of this, and yes, it is recorded. And we will make the recording available on the EIT Urban Mobility YouTube within a couple of days. Okay, so you can find it online. Now, we have a question here. We have a couple of questions about the eligibility. So one of the questions is about the requirement to have 3 employees. And yes, this is one of the criteria for startups and SMEs that are looking to apply. You need to have 3 employees in your company in order to be eligible to apply for this call. So I know we had 2 questions about that, and the answer is yes. There is a question here, Gareth, I might send this to you. It's just a question about the consortium. So some uncertainty about again, eligibility, and normally we have consortia, but in this call we don't. So Gareth, do you want to talk about that more?
Sure. As we said, this is a single mono award to one person. Okay, so it's the one company gets that. Okay, and importantly in that, you should have a partner who's going to be using your application and who does a letter of commitment so that we see it, but they would not be included in this. So there's no consortium. It's basically you and your team delivering on the agenda. Okay, so do not think you have to have a city or a provider or a university sign this with you. It's you. Okay, you are the recipient. Okay, so it's just one person that applies, but with evidence of a demonstrator that they've already lined up. Okay.
Great, thank you. And then we have some questions about the co-financing. So if startups or SMEs haven't applied to calls before, they may not be familiar with co-financing. And we have one question here that's who provides that co-financing? So Gareth, can you just kind of explain the 101 of
co-financing? 101. Yeah, co-financing. So basically means that, say you have a project with a client that's going to cost you 90,000, and we can only give you 70% of that. We don't cover that. Okay, so either your client could pay for it and you invoice them, or the SME already have their own resources and funding to cover the difference. But we will not cover any more than 70% of your costs for the project. Otherwise, it's distortion, market distortion, and we're not allowed to do that. Okay, so you have to have another source of income that's either, maybe perhaps the city will contribute part of it to pre-procure and test with you, or you might have another investor or your own reserves to do that. But we cannot do more than 70%. Okay.
Great, thank you. So we have a question about the challenge areas here that I can answer. It's just simply what to do if your solution is relevant to multiple challenge areas. And this is something that is somewhat common. We do see this. For this call, we do ask you to select one. This is just for sort of our internal organization. We know that you may be relevant to multiple, but for this call, please align more with one and describe your solution in a way that matches that challenge area. And we know that it may link to other challenge areas, but just focus on one challenge area fit for your application to this call. And let's see, we have questions about the end clients. So should the end client be in the EU, Horizon Associated, UK, or Switzerland? We've had a couple of questions about that.
Completely.
Yes. So the answer is yes. I know a couple of people asked this question. We're getting a lot of questions now, so I'm trying not to get lost. Question here about, can we submit more than one project? For example, 2 clients need different variations.
We do not want you dividing the cash. I'm so really sorry, but an 8-month timeline to get a new product to an existing client, or an existing product that's improved to a new client, is tough enough. So this is not general subsidies to your company. This is one specific. And so we don't want you using it as general subsidy to your company's income. You choose one client, and it's the client that has the best need. And between those 2 clients, see who's the one that is the best justifier. That would be great. Make a choice.
Great, thank you, Gareth. We have a question here I might send to Tony. So it's about an SME that already has EIT as an investor. Is equity the only option for them, or could they choose revenue share?
Okay, so yes, so your first option should be equity share, and the first conversation will be with Impact Ventures team. but we won't exclude any good project because we don't arrive to an understanding. So we might be exploring other possibilities if that does not progress. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, we have a question about, so startups that are just starting to pilot their solution, but they don't yet have a regular revenue stream. Are they eligible to apply for this call?
They will be eligible to apply for the call, but obviously there's going to be challenges in how they answer the lump sum. You have to have evidence behind it of what your cost bases are, that if we need to check, you know, is this compatible to projects, etc. If you move through to the second stage, there will be some questions to answer and we might have to have a chat, but I wouldn't not apply. Okay.
Great, thank you. A question about if they already have a project that's taking place, could they apply to get funding for a project that they're already running? I presume with
Not at all.
Yeah.
You cannot. So what that's called double dipping for us. So if you have any, as we said just in the previous question, we're not going to subsidize your existing running costs. We have to know that the money we gave to you made a difference to be able to develop a better product and to go into a different country or market. And it has to be because of our money. So if you're already being funded and you apply and we see it's what we call that is double dipping. When you take credit for two things from different sources, we will be watching like a hawk. Remember, this is a new model for the EU. There's a huge trust element here. And any hint of impropriety will cause them to close this program down for everybody. So we might be a little bit heavy on that. So we would ask you not to do that. Okay.
Thank you, Gareth. So we do have a question here. It's a little similar to one we answered, but I want to focus on this one. If a startup has received funding previously, does that exclude it, even if it is for a new project product? So I think this question is about actually projects that have been funded by us. So if you've been in a project with us before, this is fine, or a program with us before, this is fine. What we cannot accept is that the specific product that you have already received funding for, you're coming back and asking for more funding for that same product. Okay, so the product needs to be something new, or it needs to be a significant improvement of that product for a new client. So it can't be just ongoing work on a product that you've already received funding for from us. Okay, another question here is about the budget. So with subcontracting, is it eligible? Yes, you can have some subcontracting in your budget. There are some limits, I believe, on the maximum amount that you can subcontract. So if you go to our website where there's the call manual and the other relevant documents related to the call, there's a document there called the eligibility of expenditure. And in that document, you can find the rules and the limits on certain cost categories. So subcontracting is fine, but it can't be a huge part of your budget. There is a limit there.
If you do not have the core competences and skills in your own organization, that's a serious issue. So anything more than 10% would be red flagged. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So a challenge area question about the energy and mobility. Charging infrastructure is meant primarily for heavy electric vehicles, or could the infrastructure also be for LEV eligible for this call?
Both. Okay, light electric vehicles fine, especially if you're doing something like logistics, you know, and local delivery. So you could be heavy bus or light. It just depends on what you've got. No, we're not going to rule either out. Okay.
Great. Another question here, and this, I know we mentioned this earlier, but this is if you have two clients, one existing potential from a geography and then the other from another country, would it be helpful to have two letters of intent from those clients? We just want one.
Yeah, one. Choose one. Choose the best one that justifies and the partnership is strongest. Okay.
Okay, so some of you know that we have our innovation call, and we have a question here that is asking, is this call compatible with the innovation call? So I think, Gareth, people are wondering, could they apply for this call and then also apply for the innovation call? How do we view this?
Yeah, this call is for the business plan 23 to 25, and it is for year 23. Okay, so if you would be applying in what we call the main open call, which opens later in this year, that only starts on the 1st of January 2024, that is not an issue. It's not incompatible, but not in the same calendar year. So this project runs small calls, run in 23. There's a normal call process, which will be run throughout this year, which starts on the 1st of January 2024, different calendar year. Yep.
Great, thank you. We have another question about the 3 full-time employees. They're just asking if this year they're getting their 3 full-time employees, or do they need to show a historical record? And I would say, as long as you have your 3 full-time employees before the start of the project date, very much in place, this would be fine. But if you have your 3rd full-time employee starting in August, this would not suit the call. So as long as you have them in place by the time this project is going to get started, this would be fine. We have the question about EIT funding is 70K. No, so the max that we can give from EIT Urban Mobility for this call is the 59,500 euros. The 70K, there may have been a miscommunication here, is that your project budget could be 70K, but where the rest of that comes from, that's not the 59,500, is the co-funding. Okay, so your project budget could be 70K, but we couldn't give all of that. It's only some of that comes from EIT, and then the rest of it would be the co-funding that you include in your budget. Okay, let's see. Okay, a question here about if a SME or startup does not have an end client and they need some help finding an end client that could be interested in their solution. Are we giving some support
Not
here?
at all. I'm sorry. You need to have a sales team, targeted partners of your own. You need to be standing reasonably strong on your own feet before you apply from this. We are not going to do that for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And then a question about that 3rd deliverable. So when it comes to the KPI, the marketed innovation, we mentioned that they would need to submit the evidence of the 10K. So can you just elaborate on that, Gareth?
Okay. Your product someone wants. So for example, you can show that someone either has bought hardware piece or consultancy services or the software and its implementation, and it should be up to the value of 10K. But some of you, because you're smaller companies, that 10K is a bit weird. So say you have a solution that costs 3K and you sell to lots of clients. Of course, what we'd want is at least one invoice before December showing 3K from one client. And then over the next 6 months, we can take the other invoices that come in until we come to the summation of 10K. But you must at least have one of those invoices to open the report in the year 2023. Not saying you need to get all of the 10K. It would be lovely if you did, but some of you, depending on the price points, might have less, but we need to at least show one within that year to keep the book open and not to conclude it and say that there's a failure. Okay, so we'll explain perhaps as we move forward, but there's a way to get that done. Okay, but make sure you have one invoice open within 2023, and we can chase up the next few months to make sure that comes to 10. Okay.
Great, thank you, Gareth. We've got another question here, I think, that I'll send to Antonio. It was just some uncertainty around, I think, the FSM slide where we mentioned the max 100% payback. So they're asking if they get 50K from EIT, for example, do they then need to pay back that 50K when the project is finished?
That's a good question. So we are not giving loans. This is a grant. So what you have is the obligation to commercialize the results, the products you brought to the market, thanks to our support. During the period of 5 years, what we expect is to receive up to the maximum is the funding we have given to develop your product. But there's no obligation at all to pay back the money as a loan. So it's based on success.
Great, thank you. All right, we've got a question about when the payments happen and how they are divided.
Okay, so we have normally a disbursement that happens when you're approved. And I think that comes in about perhaps maybe 50% for the small companies. I think then we have a mid check-in point where we do another 20 or 30. And then when we close, you would be paid the final part of that. Okay, so it's broken into 3. Okay.
Great, thank you. We have another question here about the 3 full-time employees. There's a company that is looking to apply, but they have freelancers that do not live in the EU.
We appreciate that companies often use other resources and maybe have 2 and some freelancers, and that would be eligible. But the specific country you've mentioned, Iran, we cannot have that. You know, the current political tensions and blockades on Iran, it is not acceptable. So we have had cases where people outsourced work. We'd found out some of their coding had been outsourced to Vietnam, and the whole progress was blocked and they were taken to court. So do not work outside of the European Union or Horizon Europe affiliated countries. We know it might be cheaper, it might be better quality, but we can't let you send the money there. That's the way it works, okay? But you can have the first part of your question, 2 full-time staff and maybe 2, 3 freelancers with short excerpts of their CVs is fine. Okay.
Great, thank you, Gareth. A question here about the end client. So can they be private or they strictly need to be public? This could be either public or private. They need to be actors in the urban mobility ecosystem that are relevant to your solution and or product, but it's absolutely fine if they are private or public. Either would work. Question about that 3rd deliverable again, with the marketed innovation. So the co-financing, if that comes from the client in your project budget, does not count towards your 3rd deliverable. Okay, so it's great if the end client is able to provide the co-financing for your project, but that's not the same as then them making a purchase of your product or solution in terms of providing an invoice for that 3rd deliverable. Yeah, Gareth is nodding. Just wanted to make sure that I said that right. Great. Okay, so we're getting to the end of the questions. There's just a couple left. Another follow-up question about the projects that are already ongoing. It's this first one here, Gareth, if you see it. So the project was started earlier with an internal company without external funding, but no sale has been performed. It's not a typical product of the regular products that they provide. Is it still not eligible? I understood that if it's an ongoing project, this does not work. You're on mute there.
If it's an ongoing project that you've already committed to, that it's not happening because we've intervened to support, then this is just normal subsidy and we would get in trouble. It's got to, the money we've putting on the table has to make a difference to allow you go to new market, new client, new product. It can't be previously committed. That would be a serious breach of our fiduciary duty to make sure that the EU money doesn't go to, it isn't state aid, basically. Okay, it's got to be innovation aid. Okay.
Great, thank you, Gareth. And then our final 2 questions. So we were already awarded in September 2022 an EIT marketed innovation project starting in February until December. So this call is not compatible, right? So I think what they're asking, I mean, you could have another project if you have another product separate from the one that's already received funding. If you have the capacity to run 2 projects this year, and
but I will say this would attract a lot of attention, and our external observer would look at that very closely. And as I said, this is the first time we've ever tried this pilot for anyone, and we are going to be cleaner than clean. So that one is a challenging question, and you'd have to consider what you're offering and how it can be justified.
Great. Thank you, Gareth. Okay, another question about these invoices for the marketed innovation. So Gareth mentioned earlier that we will work with you to do our best to make that KPI work. And there's a question here about the invoice that is the the 3,000 euros for the service provided within the innovation pilot. So that was just an example number given.
Yes.
This could be multiple invoices that add up to that amount. It could be more, it could be less. It really depends on the cost of your product. So it doesn't need to be specifically one invoice for 30K. This was just an example.
Yeah. And importantly, the rule that we're trying to get across is that you open that report by having a successful invoice in December 23 latest. And then we keep the check open and we come back and we make sure you can close in 24 with the other billings. But we cannot have zero invoiced in 23 and then report on what you did in 25. The book will be closed. So that's how we work around it. Open with one invoice for a defined sum, and we track it for the next few months till you close the 10K. Okay.
Thank you. And then our final question of the session is about that end client letter of support. Do we have a draft template that they can use to have
No,
a starting point?
we don't provide that. Each project's different. And I mean, you know, the usual thing, who's signing the letter, do they have authority, what the relationship with you, what they aim to achieve, and things like that. It's important that your letter comes from those who are entitled to sign and who own the content and the issue in the city, or in the passenger transport authority, the people who are responsible for that. Okay.
Great. That brings us to the end of our info day. Thank you very much, everyone, for all of your questions and your attention.
Thanks a lot from our side. And from our side, we're very excited to test this. Okay. So we don't want you having to work with big industry that sometimes have more power over you and you're the smaller partner. So we want to truly make sure that you're in charge of your own development and response, and we're making it as simple as possible. Let's see if we can make it work. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.